We are back once again for yet another live edition of Chatted Up Sports. How about 2 in 1 day? That's right, 2 in 1 day. Earlier today, we had the Chattanooga Mocs head softball coach Frank Reed join us. You can hear that interview up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. As well, YouTube, all the good stuff. But we are back for another edition. And actually, this is going to serve as our second show of the week. We obviously had a show earlier in the week. Now we're going to have one tonight. Generally, we don't go live on Wednesdays, but when the NCAA tournament is going on, we want to talk about all the games. And we just didn't feel like it made much sense for us to go live during the games on Thursday. Tennessee plays on Friday. We can talk a little bit about them tonight if you want. I did see that the Tennessee basketball team is all out at the Lakers game, watching former Vol Dalton Connect ball it up for the Los Angeles Lakers. And don't worry, it's not going to be just me, although I am the only one of the Chatted Up crew here tonight. By the way, I'm Greg Larnard. If you want to follow us all over social media, I would love you forever if you did that at Chatted Up Sports. Again, you can find us on YouTube there as well and wherever you get your podcasts. Joining us tonight, we do have a special guest, a guest that is a first-time member to the show, first-time guest to the show. He is a big-time college basketball fan, much more knowledgeable than I am when it comes to college basketball. He is the host of Locked On College Basketball, also the host of Locked On Heels on the Locked On Podcast Network. Joining us for the very first time, put your hands together. My man, Mr. Issac Schade is with us this evening. Isaac, with the curls, the long hair, man, you just look snazzy with the vest, and you look much better than I do. You must look much more put together than me.
Well, honestly, it's because I've not been outside doing all the hard labor stuff that you do, Greg. I haven't been out there grinding on the diamond and doing all the good stuff. So I've been the lazy inside guy today.
That's okay. It's so good to be a lazy inside guy every once in a while. All right, let's dive into the tournament here and let's talk a little bit about last weekend. First and foremost, you've been at some of these games and you've been at some of the places where they play. Where were you this past weekend?
I've actually not been on site at games throughout the tournament. I've actually been doing studio work down in Dallas.
Oh, nice.
That Locked On has done a partnership with Amazon. And so we're doing shows that we record each weekend, and then those are going up on like Fire Sticks and all the Alexa enabled devices and stuff. So I've actually sadly have not been at games this year, which is a bummer, but that's been a fun, different kind of thing. It's like Gordon Hayward's part of it, and Monique Billings, who played at UCLA and is in the WNBA. So just a fun time with a lot of those guys and enjoying that.
That is really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the first weekend of games, the first two rounds. What were some of your biggest takeaways? Because I've been hearing a lot of chatter on the interwebs about, this has just been a boring tournament so far. There's no Cinderella teams. It's not a lot of upsets. You know, we talked about this earlier in the week on our show about how NIL is kind of eliminating some of those mid-major teams and some of the upsets and whatnot, because as soon as you're good on a mid-major team, hey, there's money to be had in bigger schools, and see you later. So give me your thoughts on the first weekend and the first two rounds, and if you've viewed this as sort of a boring tournament so far.
You know what, Greg, it's interesting. Like, as we record, of the 31 Division I conferences, 9 conference players are in the transfer portal right now. And so, guys are like, okay, I'm out. Let's go get paid. Donovan Dent is a great example of that. The leading scorer in the Mountain West Conference, he was at New Mexico. Obviously, his coach, Richard Pitino, not Rick, just went to take the head coaching job at Xavier after Sean Miller left to go to Texas. And so now he's in a conference with his dad. But we've got that scenario and others. What's interesting to me, maybe I'm different. I love a good pitcher's duel, right? Like, give me a Greg Maddux 1-0 kind of game. I'm all in on that. So where other people might find boredom, I find masterfulism, which is not a word at all, but it's what came to my head right now in real time. Like, we always talk about upsets early, chalk late. Like, that's what we're looking for, is having like that kind of thing. And so that's I've actually kind of liked this first round because we've had a lot of high level basketball games, a lot of those teams winning. And that's what I think we're going to continue to see. And hope we kind of do is that now we get into this. We've got Arkansas as the lone double-digit seed, and every other seed is a 6 or better. And so while the Maryland, the Derek Queen layup was literally the only buzzer beater we had, I think it's been great, and I'm looking forward to more great basketball this weekend.
Yeah, I am as well. And you know what? I may be in the minority, and I kind of want to ask your thoughts on it too, because and I kind of have the feeling of maybe which way you're going to go, but I love a Cinderella story. Like I really love the, St. Peter's. I love the George Mason, the VCU, the FCGU, Dunk City, or whatever they called
Yep, that's
themselves
right. Dunk
back
City.
in the
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
Yeah. I love all of those stories, FAU from a couple of years ago and whatnot. So does it make the tournament better with those type of teams making deep runs? I get, look, having a one game, upset, maybe a 15 upsets to 2, and then they get dumped in the round of 32. To me, that's a great story right off the bat, but I want something with some longevity. To me,
Yeah.
that's what makes the tournament special. You're having these Cinderella teams that make a run to the Elite Eight or the Final Four, or even like Butler to a couple of championships where they weren't able to deliver. Sorry, Gordon Hayward on that one, but throwing a little shade at your co-host there on the show. But I was happy. One of my UConn Huskies got a national championship out of that one. So
Yeah, in 11, yeah, absolutely.
do you like, one of those teams, making a run to an Elite Eight, Final Four, or would you rather see the Blue Bloods later on in the tournament?
No, I'm with it. Like, I'm gonna go middle ground on it, and here's what I mean is like I like it when we get them to like right now to the Sweet 16, and then it's like, okay, that was fun for the first weekend, and now let's let the better teams,
The big boys
play out, right? Yeah. And so, but the story of those is always so riveting, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think back to when Furman upset Virginia a couple years ago. So if you'll remember back to Virginia's national championship in 2019. One of their wins, it was like improbable where the ball got tipped to the backcourt. Kihei Clark recovers it, pitches ahead, and they send that game to overtime, and they end up winning because of this brilliant pitch ahead by Kihei Clark. Most people would have just shot it from right there, probably misses, game over. He had the wherewithal to pitch it ahead. That game that they lost to Virginia, it was because he made a dumb pass decision. Furman goes on to win that basketball. It's like the ecstasy and the agony of those two moments, man. I love stories like that so much. But then it's like, and this is what the TV network execs want. They want to see the anarchy last weekend, but then they want to see everything normalize now because it's those big fan bases that then come and get it. And we get the biggest players and the biggest names and the best stories. And so I guess I'm going to take the middle ground on it. And it's funny as I think back, like a lot of people, like you kind of asked the question, Greg, of like, is this the new normal essentially with NIL? I'm not ready to say that yet because as I look at two Final Fours ago, for example, we had a 4, 2 5s, and an 8. Not last year, but the 3 years prior to that, there was a 15 seed in the Sweet 16 each of those 3 years. We've had multiple like 8-ish around their seeds in the Final Four in recent years, right? So until we see this more consistently, I feel like this year might be the anomaly. Now, let's talk about it again 2 years down the road, and I might be saying, okay, yes, this is a trend. This is the new normal.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out and unfolds. Those mid-major programs always looking for transfers because there's always going to be guys that are at these bigger schools, maybe not getting much of an opportunity. Maybe there's a feud with a coach, something like that, and they need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And maybe we see one of those guys go to a Chattanooga perhaps and make a name for themselves and then get themselves back onto the bigger stage. And I remember when, and we talked about this on Monday, I remember when, just speaking from experience here with Chattanooga, where they had the buzzer beater in the conference tournament. They beat Furman. They get to the dance. They go to Pittsburgh. I was actually there. It was a fun environment. They almost beat Illinois.
Did.
Malachi Smith was their big player there. He transfers to Gonzaga, and then he gets an opportunity to make a deep run with Gonzaga and be part of something special there. So that's always going to happen, and we'll see what happens in terms of the NIL money and these guys kind of moving around. But
yeah, absolutely. For every Dalton Connect, you referenced him earlier, there is a, I don't even, know who I'm going to think of. Somebody from like, Kentucky or Duke that has been hoarded there was 8th or 9th buried on the bench. And Kyle Wilcher, you said Gonzaga. That's a great example. Kyle Wilcher was buried on the bench at Kentucky, goes to Gonzaga and absolutely balled out. So we got him going both ways. And I think that's going to be part of it.
Yeah, it certainly is. Again, hanging out with Isaac Schade here of Locked On College Basketball. Let's talk a little bit about the teams that are left. To you, what is the most intriguing matchup, the most delicious matchup as you kind of look at the Sweet 16 in the field that's left here?
I mean, I really like Tennessee and Kentucky. I'm excited about that game a lot. We texted a little bit about this before, but I went to college in Tennessee, and so just have a spot near and dear in my heart for the Vols. Went to college about an hour and a half away from Knoxville, so that's a real thing for me. And also one of my good buddies is a massive Kentucky fan, and it just rubs me the wrong way. So I always love to see like these kind of matchups, but I think Kentucky probably wins that game if Lamont Butler's playing. It's just so hard to know with Tennessee's offense. It's so inconsistent up and down with which Chaz Lanier are we going to get. But I feel like there's more balance to this year's offense for Tennessee. Just last year, it was like everyone would just hang out and watch Dalton go to work. And, that. So that's where the hope is, obviously, the defense as well for Tennessee. So I really like that game. I'm very intrigued by Duke and Arizona because they've played already this year in the McHale Center in Arizona, where Duke won that game. They played last year at Cameron, and Arizona won that game. So each visitor has won, and now we get a rubber match in the NCAA tournament. That's pretty fun. I honestly don't think Arizona's got anything for them, though. I mean, Duke's just playing at a whole different level right now. I think there's the intriguing storyline of can Michigan and their twin towers of Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf have anything for Auburn? And it's kind of intriguing because Danny Wolf transfers in from Yale. Yale beat Auburn in the NCAA tournament last year, so he could knock Auburn out 2 years in a row. So there's just a lot of fun storylines. And should Michigan and Michigan State both win, they play in the Elite? Like, that's wild. So there's just a lot of fun matchups here.
Yeah, there are a lot of really fun matchups in this one. And you mentioned Tennessee is one of your favorites and one of the more delicious ones. And you mentioned playing to your audience there. I appreciate you doing that here in the mostly Tennessee audience as we're in Chattanooga. But there's a lot of Vol fans that are out there and listening and watching and paying attention. And so I want you to do a little deeper dive for me. And you mentioned sort of the inconsistency of Chaz Lanier. We talked about this on Monday. And
oh, nice.
It just seems like this is a prime game where he's going to go 0 for 7 from 3 and he's going to, score 10 points and it's not going to be good. So if that were to happen, obviously that doesn't bode well. It's already happened against Kentucky. They've lost twice already against Mark Pope's squad. So what does Tennessee need to do to win this game in your eyes and kind of buck that trend and kind of get over the Kentucky hump?
Yeah. I feel like Igor Milicic really needs to step up in this game, right? Like as I think back to like mid SEC play when there were injuries and other stuff going on. And there were just moments where he just felt special. And I think there's opportunities for that again here. I'm curious to see the backcourt matchups, because obviously we've got Zakai Ziegler and Lamont Butler, these two just dynamic defensive players, but are they guarding each other, or will Zakai be on Otega Owe, who has just been going for Kentucky, right? Like just dominating his former Oklahoma team a couple times in the regular season and then in the conference tournament. Will Lamont Butler be on Zakai Ziegler, or will he have the assignment on Lanier, right? Like that seems to make some sense to me. So I think those backcourt matchups could play heavily into this game as well. There's just a lot with that plays into it. And then always, right, it feels like there are these afterthought kind of guys that step up and do something in moments like this. Like, will Felix Okpara just like be a dude all of a sudden? Or, it's like, I could just see him go, not wildly, but like, could he go for 12 and 8 and make a big impact in this game? That kind of thing alone helps you win, games like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Maybe like a Jordan Gainey going off the bench or something
Absolutely.
like that.
Absolutely.
He's been great scoring the basketball this year, and you talked about the depth already, and that's something that's been big for them off the bench in terms of Jordan Gainey getting involved in helping out Chaz Lanier or Milicic or Ziegler or Meshack. I mean, Meshack hitting that 3 to beat, what was it, Alabama, I believe it was.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, out of nowhere, the guy that you probably would least like to shoot a three makes the three. I mean, outside of Akpara or Kate Phillips or whatever, but the big boys
Yeah.
out there, they're not really stretch players, those guys. But let's talk a little bit about the specific players left in this tournament. Obviously, everybody got introduced to Walter Clayton Jr. last weekend against UConn. My UConn Huskies, RIP. I'll take the two national championships. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, I can't have too much to complain about, so I'm not complaining there. But I was really proud, by the way, of how they fought and they played Florida very, very tough game,
Yes.
all they can handle. But you've got Walter Clayton Jr., who's an absolute dude. Cooper Flagg, who everybody knows. Who is the best player left in this tournament that maybe people aren't giving enough hype to, in your estimation?
Oh gosh, we could just go team by team here. I mean, we're not going to do that. I know you. That's like no.
In your mind, I can see you going team by team. And
I know. Yeah.
that guy.
Obviously, I mean, we've got to mention Janai Broom, who is like
Mhm.
the co-front runner for National Player of the Year with Cooper Flagg. But it's interesting, like Auburn can win without him going off. Like he just had 8 points the other day, and they still won because Tahad Pettiford, who is a name I'll mention, is just this backcourt freshman that just shows up in massive moments for Auburn. He's done it all season. He started that. I don't know if Greg, you or listeners will remember, Auburn had that like fight on a plane on their way to Houston for that game earlier in the season. They had to turn around and go back. So I was like, what is this Auburn team doing? And then here we are now, in late March. But in that game down in Houston, it wasn't a true road game. They played it at the Toyota Center where the Rockets play. But here, Tahad Pettiford, just out of nowhere, like goes off. And he's done that multiple times. He was Auburn's leading scorer in the second round. He's someone that I really love staying in that South bracket. Michigan State's Jace Richardson. This is another really cool story. He's a freshman there at Michigan State. Coach Izzo, usually relies on these upperclassmen guys to drive the ship and really lead and guard and guide things. Coach Izzo's basically handed him the keys and said, dude, you got to do this. You're our most talented player. His dad, Jason Richardson, was on Michigan State's championship team back in 2000. By the way, the Big Ten's the last time they won a championship. It's insane. And now what if Michigan State goes on a run, not expected to win the national championship, but what if they did, and father and son won the last two championships in the Big Ten? Like that's a rad story right there. In the West, Derek Queen from Maryland going up against Florida. Another one of the best freshmen. Gosh, I'm just naming a lot of freshmen. One of the best freshmen in the nation hit that game-winning shot against Colorado State the other day. Oh, gosh, we got to mention JT Toppin at Texas Tech. He was at New Mexico last year. He and Darion Williams combined to score. It was like 57 of Texas Tech's like 70 points in their win in the second round. So that's a bunch of dudes on the left side of the bracket. Speaking of left side of the bracket, you mentioned that FAU team earlier. The head coach of that team and three of their starters are all on the left side of this bracket, which is crazy to me. What a cool. So Dusty May, head coach at Michigan, now was the head coach of that team. Vlad Golden, their center, is up there with Dusty May at Michigan. Then we've got John L. Davis at Arkansas, and Elijah Martin at Florida. Three of the five starters from that team are in the Sweet 16 and all on the left side of the bracket. That's a rad story. A couple guys on the right side. I mean, obviously everyone's going to know the Tennessee guys. Oh gosh. Okay. Let me just give you this one and then we can move on. Yegor Demon is BYU's point guard, 6'9". This dude is massive. He's going to be like, I'm really curious to see what BYU does guarding Alabama. Like, do they put his length on 6'1" Mark Sears? How do they go about that? That's going to be really intriguing. But this guy is NBA draft, like lottery written all over him. And so make sure to check out Yegor Demon for sure.
All right. You talked about all these good players and all these guys that we should kind of watch out for in the Sweet 16. Now I want to ask, which team do you feel like, team or teams, you could talk about plural if you'd like, which you are, like, again, you're just nerding out. And I love just listening to you and watching your brain work as you nerd out on all these different questions. But in your eyes, in your estimation, who should be on upset alert or who could be on upset alert based on what you see from the matchups here in the Sweet 16? Who might be on upset alert?
Auburn legitimately is. It's funny because they are my team that I have winning the national championship. Like they've just been so good all year.
Yeah.
But the Michigan front court presents just such a unique thing to have to contend with. 2 7-footers. It's not it's not the Spurs with their twin towers of the Admiral and Tim Duncan, but Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf is just a difficult combo to deal with. Golden is more of that traditional big. He's their leading scorer. Danny Wolf, their second leading scorer, but he's like a skilled big, right? Like I don't like Michigan's backcourt all that much with Trey Donaldson and Roddy Gale, but Danny Wolf, man, is so good with the ball in his hands. He's got great vision. And so Auburn needs to watch out in that basketball game. I truly think they do. Not worried about Duke. BYU is on a heater, man. They could legit beat Alabama. Grant Nelson from Alabama, their stretch four, is coming off a knee injury from the SEC tournament. He started in their last game against St. Mary's and looked to be fine, but that is a possibility. Never know, man. Absolutely. And I think the biggest one, though, that we've got to say is Arkansas and Texas Tech. I actually have Texas Tech in my Final Four, but it sounds like from what Coach Cal has said that Adu Thero is going to be back in this game, maybe played 10 to 12 minutes, something like that. He's their leading scorer, rebounder, and stealer. And to have missed that and yet won, like to get to the Sweet 16, Arkansas beat 2 different national champion coaches, both of whom are also Hall of Famers in Bill Self in Kansas and then St. John's and Rick Pitino. And here they are, this Arkansas team that got embarrassed at South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and then almost lost to them in the first round of the SEC tournament. Had they done so, they probably would have been on the outside looking in. Instead, here they are in the Sweet 16. They just got Boogie Fland back. They looked great against St. John's. And so Texas Tech's got to be ready to go. They might be without their third leading scorer, Chance McMillan, 14 points a game. So that's one where Arkansas really legitimately could pull this off.
All right, I hate to go backwards, but I just thought of this question as you were talking, and the radio host in me is like, dang it, I wish I would have asked this earlier. But whatever, we're on the podcast now. It's a live stream.
That's right.
It's my own rules at this point. So looking back to the first weekend in the first 2 rounds, which team are you most disappointed in that isn't and did not advance to the Sweet 16 that maybe you had a lot of high hopes for? Like, if we're just thinking about it, like for me, the way I watched St. John's all year and Rick Pitino, like I love the way they play defense. They're so physical. They handled UConn a couple of times, and they handled a lot of really good programs and won the Big East. And it was, first time since 2000 they did that and the whole thing, and won a tournament game, the whole thing. They won their first round game. They won the Big East tournament. I was really disappointed that they didn't go a little bit further. I had them going a little bit further in my bracket. That was just one team that kind of stood out to me. Who is a team or teams that you were a little disappointed didn't make it this far?
Yeah, I mean, what a bummer. RJ Lewis just laying an egg in that game, sitting on the bench as things wound down. I'll give you a high major and a mid major. How about that? Okay. The high major for me is Illinois. They had struggled kind of mid-season, mid-Big Ten play, I guess I would say, where they caught mono, it ravaged their team. And it was like a sickness that felt like a lot of teams around the country were dealing with and having a hard time getting back from. But I loved the story because preseason Coach Brad Underwood was like, we're going to be phenomenal offensively. Like I'm not, cards on the table, but I think a junior high boys team could put up 90 on us. I remember him saying something to that effect at Big Ten Media Days. But they were led in scoring by 3 different freshmen. We talked about big Yegor Demon from BYU. Illinois also has a bigger point guard, kind of slender as well, Kasparis Yakichonis, who is just a little bit of a do-it-all guy. They had Zvonimir Ivisic that was at Kentucky, went to Arkansas. His brother, Tomislav Ivisic, played for Illinois, one of their 3 leading scorers. And then Will Riley, who reclassed and was supposed to be a senior in high school. That's their 3 leading scorers. Wow. And they were doing it. I had Illinois in my Final Four, but they just ran into that Kentucky team, and Kentucky had their way with them. And so for Illinois, man, that's tough outs 2 years in a row, because you, sir, as a UConn guy, will remember that 30-0 run last year, which
yeah.
I just laugh when I think about that run. Man, that's great.
It was.
So I was kind of bummed Illinois didn't keep going. And then the mid-major team that I really wanted to see keep going was Drake. It was just such a cool story. I had picked them over Mizzou in the first round, which caught me some heat because I actually live in Missouri, and a lot of my friends were like, Schade, I saw you on that show. You're out here picking against the Tigers. What's up? But it's such a cool story because Ben McCollum, their head coach, had been a D2 coach at Northwest Missouri State, won 4 national championships there, had gotten the call to come to the D1 level, which you just don't see happen a ton, right? But he brought 4 of his D2 players with him. They were all in the starting lineup for Drake, a Missouri Valley Conference team, right? It's not like a high major, but it's top 10 conference in the country. And he's got 4 D2 players in the starting lineup, and they won a NCAA tournament game against an SEC squad. I mean, it's just crazy. So they were led by Bennett Sturtz. That's the guy. He's the scorer. He's the kind of, not like Cooper Flagg leading 5 categories statistically, but man, it was just a great story. And I was hoping they could get one more just to let it keep riding, but just quite couldn't get there. And so that was a bummer.
All right, my last one for you. I want to ask a little bit about the head coaches in different places. You just mentioned Ben McCollum. Obviously, he's going to Iowa.
Yeah.
You've got Ryan Odom going to from VCU to Virginia. Will Wade, obviously, going to NC State. Nico Medved going from Colorado State to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Richard Pitino on the move to Xavier. You've got who's the guy from Xavier? What was his name that's going to Texas?
Sean Miller.
Sean Miller, that's right. And if there's any other that I forgot about or didn't mention, please feel free to let me know. But yeah, who are a couple of your favorites, coaching moves and hires?
Well, let me just tell you some of my favorite storylines with it, because they just show up here as well, which let me combine that with the Sweet 16 really quick, going back to last year's coaching carousel. So SMU fired their head coach. That was the move that set off the whole chain that brought Coach Cal from Kentucky to Arkansas. So SMU fires their coach. They bring in Andy Enfield from SMU. Eric Musselman from Arkansas goes to SMU. Coach Cal leaves Kentucky, goes to Arkansas. Mark Pope leaves BYU, goes to Kentucky. And then Kevin Young leaves being an assistant coach for the Suns to go to BYU. I bring that up because those last 3 coaches, Kevin Young at BYU, Mark Pope at Kentucky, and Coach Cal at Arkansas, all 3 of those are in the Sweet 16 now. First year at these new schools. I mean, it's so cool. Yeah, it's crazy.
It is.
Of the ones in this year's cycle that have already happened, 2 of the ones you just mentioned have previously beaten the school, knocking them out of the NCAA tournament that they're now coaching. Sean Miller at Xavier just beat Texas in the play-in game last weekend, and now he's their head coach. But here's the crazy one. So Ryan Odom, now at Virginia, in 2018, he was the head coach at UMBC, the first ever 16th seed to knock off a 1 seed. And now he is the head coach of that team. Now, I don't know if he'll retain him, but Kyle Guy, who was on that team, was on the national championship team a year later, is an assistant coach at Virginia. So if he retains him, I just that's cinema to me, man. That's so fun. But the ACC needs dudes like this because the ACC's been struggling. They've lost Roy Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, Jim Boeheim, Mike Bray, Leonard Hamilton, Jim Larinaga, all 6 of those dudes since the end of the 21 season. That's crazy, right? Yeah. And now they're and the issue for the ACC is like the elder statesman now is Brad Brownell at Clemson. Like he is the longest tenured ACC coach at this point. Behind him would have been Kevin Keats, but he just got the can too. So it's like the ACC needs new high-level coaches if they want to get back to the top of things along with the SEC. And that's part of why the SEC is so good, because they've hired great coaches. And so I love the Will Wade hire at NC State. I love the Ryan Odom hire for Virginia there. His dad was the Wake Forest coach when I was coming up, and has just been so good. And Ryan's been great at every stop at UMBC, at Utah State, at VCU. And I mean, I just had all 3 of those teams in the NCAA tournament, and Virginia needs that. So I think John Shire's really got some stuff going at Duke. And so the ACC needs these coaches to step up and get these programs back to respect. Like I love what Pat Kelsey did in year 1 at Louisville, coming off of a year with 2 years with Kenny Payne where they won 12 total games. That's not Louisville, man. And college basketball is just better when Louisville's good. So to see them rise back and get an 8 seed here in the tournament was good.
Man, I can't thank you enough for jumping on, and I cannot wait for you to do a little deep dive into this whole Xavier fans going on Twitter and taking up all the Sean Miller Twitter account names so he can't grab something for his new UT, well, the other UT.
Or they're going to have to I want to see him have to go pay somebody for one.
Yeah. Oh my God. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that happens? I'm going to be watching your Twitter feed because I know you'll have it in case that does happen. But man, I can't thank you enough. It's been great to get a chance to know you, talk to you a little bit, get the college basketball knowledge. Before you go, I'd be remiss if I did not ask your thoughts on North Carolina as also the host on LockedOn Heels. Just not Roy Williams, but
Hubert Davis.
Hubert Davis. Yeah, there's his name. Hubert Davis as the head coach there. Do you think he's long for this job? Do you think they need a little freshness in there in terms of a head coach, as you mentioned, the ACC, and your thoughts on them getting into the tournament, obviously winning and getting that play-in game, then kind of getting bounced after everybody's like, oh, they're gonna make it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it was looking like they were playing hot, playing an Ole Miss team that I thought they should have beat. Yeah. But they played like they had at points in the season when things did not go well. It's been a weird ride in the Hubert Davis era. This was his 4th season. In the first season, they played a bad 2/3, and then they ended Coach K's career and made it to the national championship game out of nowhere.
Amazing.
The next year, they missed the NCAA tournament. Last year, they were a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. They lose to Alabama in the Sweet 16 in the only game all season where RJ Davis didn't make a 3-point shot. Had he done so, they win that basketball game. And then this year was kind of similar to that first year where it's like, y'all ain't about to make this NCAA tournament and things are looking bad. They squeak in by the skin of their teeth, win a play-in game, and then get bounced by Ole Miss. And so it's like every year has been wildly different than all the other years. So it's so hard to know what is the reality. And I think part of that is going back to our NIL conversation of like, it's so hard to build a program now because you're basically building a team year after year after year. Yeah. And so it's about making, not just getting talent, but getting the right talent. And that's going to be the bugaboo for every coach, honestly, in this era. It's seemed to go best for Hubert Davis when he has a legit stretch four that can rock things. So that first year, it was Brady Manick, the Oklahoma transfer. Last year, it was Harrison Ingram that came in from Stanford. This year is when they finally realized they had struggled to find it all year and then eventually put Jalen Withers into that role. And that's when things kind of turned around and they won 8 out of 10 down the stretch. They've hired, North Carolina has a GM ahead of next year. His name's Jim Tanner, was one of the great NBA agents. Has, I mean, millions and millions of dollars that he has brokered deals for. And some of the biggest names out there that you would ever know. If things don't go well, now that Hubert Davis has shifted that off his plate, like if year 5 is not even just like good, if it's not great, I think they're done. I think they're going to have to move on. And I hate that, right? Like, I just, like the humanity in me, like the further and further I get into this, is these aren't just random robots with jobs. These are men and women who have families and jobs. And so you want to see them succeed, you know, and you get that, you're a coach, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to see it go well. But I think the reality is if 2025, 26 isn't a great year, you probably got to move on.
Very well said. A lot of truthful words there, and sometimes the truth does hurt. Issac Schade, again, has been our guest. So we want to thank him. And as it says below on the little ticker here, if you're watching live or watching back on the video form, at Issac Schade. Yes, there is a C. It is silent, but don't forget it because it's very, very important. You can find him on at Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Heels as well. Tell the people just how often you guys are doing shows and where they can find you and all that good stuff.
That's great stuff. So with Locked On Network, it's actually a daily 30-minute show Monday to Friday. I'm typically doing stuff even on the weekends, especially during the tournament, both for Tar Heels and college basketball. We are also during the tournament, my co-host Andy Patton and I are joining with the panel down in Dallas, Texas to do some studio work in partnership with Amazon. So you can find all of those shows on any Amazon or Alexa enabled device. Like I use Fire Sticks at my house and they just pop up there. I actually a promo with me standing next to a very tall WNBA player looking like an infant just popped up on my TV screen. But man, those are great. Check them out. A lot of fun there. But man, I love college basketball and I want to share it with the world. And so if y'all want to come on that journey with me, come on, let's do it together.
Yeah, the LockedOn network is fantastic. Like you said, 30 minutes a day, just boom, bang, bang, whatever you need. It's a fantastic network, and listen
I'll
to a
shout
lot of
out
different.
Eric Kane, who's the great host of Locked On Vols. Man,
He
he does
is.
a fantastic job.
He does. I really enjoy listening to him. He's a friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times. We love
Nice.
Kaner. So we'd love to get the Locked On network involved here on Chatted Up Sports. So we appreciate you, Isaac, for spending
My
some
pleasure.
time with us this evening, and we look forward to having you back again.
I would love to do it. My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Follow us all over social media at Chatted Up Sports. Until next week, enjoy the games this weekend. Peace and love.
Go Mocs.
That's right. Go Mocs, baby. Powers.